Okay, my name is Jenny, and I'll be today's room host for this morning. And just as a note before we start, this morning's session will be recorded and will be posted to the website for reference if you want to go back and revisit any content. And of course, please feel free to share any portion of this session to anyone who would be interested in this content and whom you think would benefit from any information or insight given at today's talk. And to begin with our first speaker, it is with great pleasure and appreciation that we introduce to you our first keynote speaker to open the UX at conference, Darren Hood. He holds 27 years of experience and user experience with his professional footprint spanning Ford Motor Company, General Motors, Digitus, MRM, Wonderman Digital, Bosch, Ryder, Cengage Learning, USA Networks, and more. He currently serves as a senior staff UX designer at BD and as an adjunct professor for Kent State University, Brandeis University, and UCLA, and leads UX workshops in Detroit and Grand Rapids. He also hosts the World of UX podcast, which is available through a host of popular sources, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Bringing the worlds of academia and industry together, Hood embodies the entire goal of our conference. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming him to the stage as he speaks about the purpose, importance, and potential impact of UX maturity.
So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the talk. I could probably good for me to get away from the speaker or from the screen. I'm going to talk to you today, as Jenny mentioned, about the purpose, importance, and potential impact of UX maturity. And I'll tell you now, a lot of what we're going to talk about is not going to be things that, at least in the beginning part of this, we're not going to talk about things that many of you are not already familiar with. There is a message embedded in this, a bit of a hypothesis embedded in what we're going to talk about today, because we're basically talking about branching out. There are some things that, with regard to the importance of UX maturity, we need to embrace. But beyond that, we need to change our thinking. And I want to plant that seed now. And then I'll give you the details on that as we move along. A little bit about me, again, as Jenny mentioned, 27 years in the discipline. It's my beautiful wife, Angela, who happens to be with me today. She's back there. Got a master's, 2 UX-related master's degrees, one from Syracuse, one from Kent State, because I'm dumb and I like to keep learning. So that's usually a joke. Nobody laughs. Maybe people. I just get I get the soberness kicks in every time I look at my student loan balance. I love bowling. I love sharing personal things. I love bowling. I love photography. My wife and I love cats. It's one of our cats, Rocky, who happens to be in the Michigan Humane Society calendar a few years ago. You happen to have seen that. And I love bicycling, which helped me to lose 100 pounds not too long ago. Time to get back to that. But at any rate, that's just a little bit about me. This is a pretty broad view of my professional footprint. It does not include everywhere where I've had impact and everywhere where I work, but I love showing this just to show places where I've worked, places where I've supported, places where I've consulted, where I've taught, where I've been a beta tester, whatever it is, all types of things that I've been worked in conjunction with are here. I like to joke and say that I pretty much don't run into anybody that hasn't touched something that I've had a hand in designing. So all you have to do is go to CVS, and I designed the logistics system to help deliver stuff to CVS. So if you went to CVS, then we've crossed paths. So we'll start off by level setting. Like to do that, and we're going to start off with that just by giving an overview of UX maturity. I would expect the vast majority of people at this event to have some familiarity with UX maturity. So this is something that I'm going to go through relatively quickly so we can get to the point. UX maturity defined, we're going to use Rolf Molik, who's one of the people who actually worked on some of the initial famous UX work with Jacob Nielsen, but he gets overlooked a lot. He was there in the beginning, so we'll give him a little shout out here. His definition of UX maturity is that it's the ability of an organization or a product team to define and meet UX goals and help to achieve business goals. Again, not rocket science per se, not something we're not familiar with, but something we still need to know for the purpose of today's talk. A group called Wow Makers defines UX maturity as something that measures how well a company designs, builds, and delivers experiences to users that meet their needs. And one of the things I want to point out now to make sure we're all on the same page, again, we're level setting now, you're going to notice a common thread between all these. I'm going to put you to work cognitively here. You're going to notice a common thread between this messaging with UX maturity. And it's going to be critical to know and understand that as we get into the weeds a little bit later. Number 3, and we'll do these in threes for the most part. Jonathan Earthy, another person who goes, how many of you have never heard of Jonathan Earthy? And that's what I about expected. About 75%, at least 75% of hands go up. You know that he created the first UX maturity model that a lot of the newer ones are based off of? Nobody knows that. And I always tell people, for those of you who, how many of you follow me on social media? Okay, a couple of you know how loud I get and how outspoken I am about things. One of the things that you're going to excel in UX, it is critical that you learn as much as you can about UX history. A lot of people coming into UX don't know a lot about UX history, and then there are things you don't know. You don't know the pioneers. You don't know a lot of the basics, like wireframes have disappeared, become a thing of the past. Why? It's a critical part, but how many times do you see people learn about UX and they don't do wireframing? And so just as a quick example, history helps. Trust me, the more you learn about UX history, the more it will help you. This man is grossly overlooked. And of course, it wasn't called UX when he did this. He came up with this. He wrote the paper in 1998. And it was, of course, it wasn't called UX. Back then, there was one person who had UX in their title. That was it. That wasn't common until about 2007, 2008. It wasn't even common to see the UX acronym floating around. So, but he said it's a model of how organizations progress through levels of understanding of human-centered issues. Measuring an organization's level on this scale provides information with which to plan the improvement of human-centered processes. That sounds very sciencey, and it is. And truth be told, UX is a science, and a lot of people don't know that either. So now, just getting those definitions out of the way, let's look at a few UX maturity models, and we're going to fly through this too. A lot of stuff you have seen, some you have not. This is basically Jonathan Earthy's usability maturity scale. He didn't call it a UX maturity scale. He called it usability maturity scale. He did not create it with these graphics. I did, because all he gave was a list. And I couldn't stand to see that. So, because it looked like something out of Excel to me. So I put it with the graphics just to help people see. It starts off with unrecognized. The practice is unrecognized in the organization, grows to being recognized. Then it's something that gets considered. You'll get a copy of this deck, I'm sure, later, so you'll be able to get into the details with this. But number 4, it's implemented, then eventually it becomes integrated, and then it becomes institutionalized. And contrary also to popular belief, a lot of companies, the UX maturity levels are low. You're excited about getting that first job, and you get that first job, and then you get in there and you find out nobody cares about what you do. Or you do all your research and you say, this research is great and it's going to really help the company. And you show people the report from your research and they look at you and go, I don't care, do this. That's a reflection of poor UX maturity level. That's what that is. And yes, it does happen a lot to the best of us, to the most experienced of us. This is the one that people are most familiar with. This was created by Jacob Nielsen in 2006, goes from hostility. Yes, hostility to being developer-centered. Anybody ever done UX work where the developers are calling the UX shots? You know, and it's 2023 and it's still happening. And then you get into these fights, not physically, but I have seen people ball up their glasses before because they were angry about what happened. But I literally have seen that. But developer-centered, then you have Skunk Works, which I got to call that one out. That's when guerrilla, the pinnacle of the UX work is guerrilla user research, or you're calling in external people to do your UX work. That's called Skunk Works. Then you have the dedicated budget. If you get here, which is pretty much where most companies sort of top out here, unfortunately. But you got a dedicated budget. If you're there, celebrate, have a potluck. So that's an accomplishment. Then it's managed. And just because a company has a UX manager doesn't mean that they're managing UX yet. They can have a manager and still be back here. Just so you know. Systematic processes, it's integrated, which is parallel to what you saw with Earthy, and then user-driven corporation. Please note that one of the reasons that a lot of leaders were afraid of this model over the years was because of this column over here. How long it takes to get to these levels. People say, okay, I love what you're saying. How long will it take us to get here? Oh, it'll take you 20 years. Oh, you get out of here. You know, that's pretty much the end of that. So you don't see this column anymore. It's simply a matter of advancing from one level to another. So important to know. This one is created by Jacob Nielsen. A year ago, this was supposedly the new version of what you saw. Notice that certain things are missing. I'm not a fan of this because this is I call this the politically correct UX maturity model. And there's still hostility. There's still skunkworks. And if we educate people and don't tell them that those things are still happening, we're doing them a disservice. That's my personal take. You'll see a few personal rant takes in between a lot of these. This one, to my knowledge, was created by James Wondrak. I've seen two names associated with this, but James Wondrak's name was the one that I'm familiar with. And he talked about being unrecognized, interested, invested, committed, engaged, embedded. No, the typo's not mine, it's his, and committed. Again, quite the same. So another thing you'll see here is that there's not a lot of difference between what people are identifying in their UX maturity levels. Now, I'll touch on that again in a moment. Zebia, they talk about being oblivious. I love that word. Interested, invested, committed, embedded, and user-centered. Again, not a lot of difference, and a lot of it is semantics for the most part. And sometimes the words give you a little bit more of a pop, a little bit more understanding, and help drive different actions than others do, but still pretty cool. This is mine. This is the one I created, and got apathy, exploration, adoption, saturation, and assimilation. And another thing about UX maturity levels that's critical to know that I think is important is that they should be structured in a way, because you can use any UX maturity level you want. There's no shortage of them. There is no shortage of UX maturity level models out there. If you do a search, and I purposely don't say Google it because I'm a DuckDuckGo guy. So, but if you look, you'll find them all over the place. And it's actually fun and it's informative to just look at what the different schools of thought are. That's the academic approach. Look at everything. See what works for you. But one thing you'll find is that a lot of them are pretty much the same. And they just vary when it comes to the terminology that's used. Here's one that looks like one of the ones that I just showed you, Wombat, I believe it was. But they use the same actual, the visual piece is the same with different words. That's fine as long as it helps you and in your organization. And the key is with any UX maturity level, whichever one you feel is best, whichever one you ascribe to, whichever one you subscribe to, whichever one you implement in your organization, the key is that you're going from one level to another, and you need to know what you need to do to go from one level to another. That's when it becomes practically helpful. And that's where they really, really have a lot of great impact. When I think about the purpose of, as we start to get into the things that are in the title here, I took this definition from NNG. It was supposedly a definition of UX maturity, but to me, it came across as more of a purpose statement. So that's why I put it here. UX maturity measures an organization's desire and ability to successfully deliver user-centered design. It encompasses the quality, the consistency of research and design processes. Sounds challenging, doesn't it? Resources, tools, and operations, as well as the organization's propensity to support and strengthen UX now and in the future through its leadership, workshop, and culture. So UX maturity empowers an organization to really master all of these things. So you can see it's a purpose statement, but you can see the importance of it if you look at it from that perspective. It's not something to be taken lightly. And something else that I probably would not have mentioned later, so I'm going to throw it in here. It's something that's not going to manage itself. A lot of organizations do not deliberately engage in managing UX maturity. If you ever meet anybody at organizations, ask them, what do you folks do to manage your UX maturity? You're going to get deer in the headlights. Or you're going to get a pause or a long because they're not. I talk to them. I talk to people all over the world. I mentor people all over the world. I talk to leaders all over the world. You do not have people who will tell you this is our plan for managing UX maturity level and be genuine about it, that they actually have been doing it. Literally, some people will answer you because they don't want to not say anything, frankly, but they're not. It's not happening. Now, that purpose statement, it sounds good. This is where I challenge you. I said I was going to challenge you cognitively to think about the common thread between some of those earlier definitions. Anybody know what the common thread was? I know it's sort of a trick question here, and I know you might not get the answer, but it's just for the purpose of providing some energy and some direction. Anybody know this? And Keith, you're not eligible to answer this. Yes.
But I thought that they all imply a forward progression that improves that implies better.
And are you talking about I think I made a mistake. Are you talking about the maturity level models or the definitions?
The model.
Sorry. Yes, you are correct about the model. So give her the bear. But the definition, I'm sorry, I didn't clarify. The definitions, those early, and I know it was a little bit since, been a few minutes, but did anybody notice a common thread? If you don't, that's fine. Because of course I'm going to tell you. Anybody? They all focus on doing the work. And somebody said, well, that's not bad. No, it's not. But what if there's more available through embracing UX maturity models and what they have to offer? What if we've been missing something? We've been looking at UX maturity, we've been focusing on the work, and that's fine. But we've been missing if I use a baseball metaphor, a batting average, if 10 out of 10, that's a batting average of 1,000. But what if I told you that we've only been batting like 200 at best? That we're missing a lot of other opportunities. That we're missing chances to make impact that we could make if we looked at UX maturity differently. That's where my hypothesis comes in. That's where these things change a bit. And this is where we are. We've been doing great. We've been walking around, we've been getting stuff done. But truth is, we've reached our limit in general because we've only looked at how it helps us to do the work. My podcast, I specialize in talking about things that there's no shortage of people who tell you how to do UX work. And then when you get the job and you go in, and what happens? You find out that the work is a very small percentage of what you actually do. And you spend a bunch of time evangelizing. You spend a bunch of time trying to sell stakeholders. You spend a bunch of time trying to engage in customer service related activities. You manage relationships. EQ is off the charts. So if you get a UX job, if you lack soft skills, you're going to suffer. I almost walked away from UX in 2007 because there were things that people didn't tell me about the discipline. And when somebody told me one day that healthy friction is good, it changed everything for me. And here I am, 15, 16 years later, because of that. So there's a lot of other things going on, and we don't want to be the people that we're getting things done, but we're about to step off the edge of a building because we've limited ourselves to looking at UX maturity from the perspective of the work alone. So if we extract two key things out of that statement that I got from Nielsen Norman Group, we extract those out. UX maturity levels shed light on and support the following critical factors. We'll skip the first two because we already covered those. Here's things that we're not doing today. Or if we are, it's minimal. The recognition, value ascribed, and understanding of UX. You can use UX maturity levels to help drive that. You have to be deliberate, but you can do that. It helps you to look at the level of authenticity and the ethics within a team's practice. How many of you did not realize that UX is actually an ethical discipline? If you don't engage in the work ethically, you're going to lose the ability to drive trust. You're going to lose the ability to sell leadership on the value of what you do. How many of you know that when you come into the room the first time, you just got a job, you come in, you do a research report, and don't you usually assume that everybody values you and knows what you're doing? Isn't that the case? And the truth is that they don't know. And they see what you're saying as opinion and not expert opinion. And there's a big gap between the two. And so you have to earn trust. So ethics then plays a part, because if you don't present information in a trustworthy and reliable manner, you're not going to earn their trust. So ethics is at the core of that. So that's critical. The level of authenticity of leadership's support for the practice is something that can be gleaned from managing UX maturity. And there's a lot of people that do lip service. You know, we support our UX team, and then they don't think about UX again until the quarterly town hall. And they don't think about it at all. How many of you know that we don't get anywhere without leadership support? We don't. We simply don't. So that's critical. The attention and effort committed to driving and managing UX maturity. As mentioned earlier, a lot of people, they're not deliberate about managing UX maturity. It manages itself. And you're going to see a graphic that will reflect what happens when you let UX maturity manage itself. And most companies are doing exactly that. And then here's the big one. I hear this all the time. Why do they always ask for an entry-level person with 3 years of experience? Isn't that it's almost a song, you know, entry-level. You can almost do that. But do you know that we can impact as part of the UX maturity movement, if you will, as part of what it can impact? If your company has poor hiring practices and principles, that is a sign that there needs to be more synergy between the UX operation, HR, hiring managers. We need to reflect the discipline properly. The position I'm in now, my boss wrote the job description. I'm like, this is great. He said, I wrote it. Like, oh man, really? You're really talking about what we're going to be doing? And I'm doing exactly what they said. What a novel idea. I can't tell you how many times I've been baited and switched. Anybody ever here? Ever been baited and switched? You get the job, then you go in, you do something completely different. I want you to be a BA. What? And you find out that's it. And when you talk to them about UX, they look at you, and then they look back down at the work and they flat out ignore you. I hear these stories all the time. And so get rid of the rose-colored glasses as quickly as you can for those of you that are just starting out with UX, because you're going to need to get rid of that. You need to see what's actually happening so you can navigate the space. But we can impact not only the job descriptions, not only the recruiting process, we can impact who gets hired. And when you have companies where they hire non-UXers to run UX departments, and not that it can't be done, I've seen it. My best boss I ever had was a non-UXer, but he respected the discipline. He knew what he didn't know, and he trusted and he respected me. And he just, okay, go do your thing. You're smart. You know what to do. Go knock it out. Best boss I had when I was working for Bosch. Yes, I was a manager for automotive aftermarket. We did great things at that company because my boss knew to tell me what you want and get out of my way. A lot of companies, not the case. It's not the case at all. So those are all areas that get missed. In addition to that, usually UX maturity is another common thread with the definitions earlier, is that UX maturity is usually only thought about at the organizational level. It has traditionally been viewed that way. That's just the way it's been. That's part of the 20%. Because we've looked at it from such a short-sighted perspective, we've lost a lot of potential benefit. So I'm challenging people to broaden those perspectives today. So we got organization UX maturity. That's a given. If anything, that's where people are aware. If people look at UX maturity models, that's the stuff they're looking at. That's what they're thinking about. That's what they're applying things to. And even for the people who have been deliberately involved, they still miss the other three for the most part. And the other three that I introduce are, number one, discipline-wide UX maturity. Anybody ever thought about the fact that we have a UX maturity level? See all those ratings? There's one that applies to the entire discipline. And we suffer today, and the discipline-wide UX maturity is low because of, like, people. How many of you ever heard people complain about gatekeepers? And there's a lot of people who complain about that. How many of you didn't know that every other established, respected and trustworthy discipline in the world got there because of gatekeepers. All of them. They have standards. They have principles. They know what excellence is. There's no question. They reach agreement on what the definitions of the practice are, and they deploy them, and they knock the ball out of the park. UX, not so much. On top of the fact that people have brought in what are urban definitions and gaming world definitions of gatekeeping, applied it to UX, that we don't need gatekeepers. No, we need gatekeepers bad. Really bad. And one of the reasons we struggle is because we don't. So when you don't have a gatekeeper, you have anarchy. In a discipline that's roughly 25 years old, as we know it today, 20 to 25 years old, and we have too much anarchy, and that's why we suffer a lot. That's why the non-UXer gets hired to run the UX team. It doesn't care about UX, and all they do is hire their buddies to come in. Then they have a department. Anybody ever seen a department full of folks and nobody knows what UX is? They're not going to get UX done. There's a lack of ethics. Nobody wants to say this stuff, so I'm the bad guy because I'm always the one that's willing to say it. And I've seen it. I've been victimized by it, and I don't like it. I don't appreciate it, and I don't want that for you. So I respect people enough to tell them what's really going on. So that's 2 cents behind that. There is a discipline-wide UX maturity, and something that feeds into it is personal and team UX maturity. People think about UX maturity at the organization level, but they don't think about it when it comes to the personal and the team level. You have a personal UX maturity. You need to manage it. You need to be deliberate about it. And it's something that it gets overlooked. All of the UX maturity talk, all this time, and all people ever think about is the organization. Excuse me. And all these other things get overlooked. Here's a big one. And of course, there's a lot more to be said than this. I can't get this done in 35 minutes, so I'm trying my best. Educational UX maturity is non-existent. And when I'm talking about that, any educational venue, whether it is places like this, I teach at 6 universities actually. Because I teach at University of Michigan too, and there's other universities. I'm tied in. I help design the Masters of UX program. I think Keith, you're tied into that too as well. The Masters of UX program at Michigan State, teaching the UX course in that program. And all of these, what was it? I asked Siri one day, how many universities in the country? And the answer was somewhere in the vicinity of 6,500. And then I knew that there was less than, or approximately, better put, 165 UX programs in those 6,500 institutions around the country. Only, that's it. And of those, very few pay any attention to the fact that they have a UX maturity level as well. And when they bring in non-UXers, I know one university that they're so busy trying to bring in all their PhD buddies from another university where they graduated from, they only have like a handful of people who are actually practitioners to teach the courses. So people aren't actually learning UX. So if people don't learn UX, but these programs aren't structured properly, they're the ones that are bringing people in to work in these jobs. How do you think that impacts the discipline-wide UX maturity? How do you think it impacts the organizational UX maturity? How do you think that impacts the personal and the team? So these things not only are critical and they've been grossly overlooked, grossly underrated. Importance. It's a general sentiment that a more mature UX practice leads to organizational success. Jeff Sorrell mentioned that. NNG stated to understand your organization's UX maturity is important so you can identify your strengths and weaknesses, uphold and reward what's done well, and acknowledge to improve what's not. Sean Van Tine stated that organizations that manage and measure their UX experience process gain the revenue benefits from satisfied customers. Again, these are all obvious. These are all obvious. So my take is, per the statement from NNG in particular, without giving attention to UX maturity and that broadened perspective, which actually serves as a measurement tool, an organization's UX operation is basically flying blind. The old blind squirrel adage. The blind squirrel can find the nut. There will be some success, but it's fleeting. So any successes achieved, they're fleeting and they're not deliberately repeatable. And you got this, the Titanic. Overconfidence is a bad thing to have in your toolbox. and they were overconfident. And there are icebergs ahead of all of us. The question is, what will happen as you approach it? Will you be able to navigate around it? Will you see it in the distance? Or will you think about how unsinkable you are and just keep on going and not care about anything? As unsinkable as that ship was, there were things out there that could take it out. And that's exactly what happened. And I know that that's like, oh, that's there. Success is optimized by imagining the worst and preparing accordingly. It's called risk mitigation, isn't it? Isn't that what we do as UX people? So it's important. Potential impact, we begin to bring it home here. Holistic awareness, attention to, commitment to UX maturity approaches includes the following benefits. It helps devise strategies to optimize UX practice in an org, promotes greater understanding of and value placed in UX, heightens authentic practicing of UX principles, not a lot of the fake stuff that's going on today. I don't have time to get into that. It cements ethical approaches and execution, fosters more empathic and genuine engagement with leadership, produces greater skill and acumen among practitioners, optimizes learning experiences and associated expectations, improves recruiting and hiring, reduces attrition, a lot of savings to be made there when you can hire people and keep them, and it dispels ambiguities associated with the discipline. That is a sign of a UX maturity issue. So wrapping up, UX maturity is basically a set of rubrics that drive success. Traditionally, UX maturity is only focused on the work itself, as mentioned. Most UXers don't need to be sold on the benefits associated with UX maturity, but they do have to be sold on doing the work that it takes. I run into a lot of people. That sounds like a lot of work. Well, that's why we're here. So let's get it done. It's time to deliberately extend our application of UX maturity beyond the norm. We need to start looking outside the organization. And yeah, we got to work to manage that. And beyond corporate UX maturity, new areas of focus include personal and team UX maturity, discipline-wide UX maturity, and educational and academia UX maturity. These are three untapped areas. They're not being addressed. Someone will say, okay, Darren, I'm on board. I hear you. I get it. You sold me. Where can I start? This paper is available. You can find this. And when you get your copy of the deck, you'll see the link, or you can just do a search on it. You can find it. From snake oil to science, measuring UX maturity. And it talks about scientific ways to measure it. And Sorrell mentioned that a lot of people talk about it, but he said a lot of people don't talk about how you actually measure UX maturity. This paper will help give you some insights. It's a really short thing, like 3-4 pages, but it's pretty insightful stuff. And for you people who are wondering, where's my organization now? There's a test. People don't know about this. There's a test on the NNG site, a quick and dirty test that you can take, and you can look at and try to gauge what your organization's UX maturity is. And from a personal UX maturity level, you can apply these same things at the corporate level to yourself on the at the personal level. There's also something that I've done called the UX Cycle of Excellence. You can find that at uxuncensored.medium.com, and you can look at, that's another way to look at where you are on a personal level. So that is me. Nailed it time-wise, didn't I? I got a minute and a half to spare. So where can you find me? The World of UX podcast is available wherever you can find podcasts. I'm on Twitter under UX Uncensored and Darren Hood, mostly under Darren Hood. I'm on LinkedIn. That's where most people connect with me, and we go back and forth. I host something, a global meetup. We're in our third year called the UX Chit Chat Hour. We meet right now, except for the last Friday each month from 12:15 Eastern Time to 2:15 Eastern Time. If you want to meet and talk, just random coffee house conversations, what we call it, with UXers from around the world, you can feel free to join us there. What is it? The YouTube channel, UX Uncensored YouTube channel, the uxuncensored.medium.com, Instagram. I'm everywhere. So, and for you Family Guy fans, I'm like raccoon rooms everywhere. My wife watches Family Guy. She's forced to watch Family Guy with her, so she got that. But there is a place you can't find me. So feel free, get in touch. You ever have any thoughts? You ever have any questions? Reach out. I talk to people all the time, so you might as well join in on that. So that's it. Thank you. Question time.
I'm just curious. So, if that is where things are currently at, what would you say the path is? Like, where's the the trajectory?
UX's current trajectory is downward. I'm known for frequently citing that UX has been under siege since 2011. There are a lot of people been coming into the discipline. Forbes and other organizations were doing these articles talking about how this was the discipline of tomorrow, and this is where you want to get a career in UX. And people started doing what we call the gold rush. So you get all these people trying to come into the discipline, but with all these people trying to come into the discipline, they're not understanding what UX is. A lot of them don't check to see whether or not they're actually fit for UX. Everybody's persona is not good for this kind of work. It can be thankless at times. It can be volatile at times. And so you got all these people that are rushing to get into it. Then you got these organizations who only got into UX and started opening the door to UX because of the IBM and the NASA research that said for every dollar you invest, you get X dollars in return. So they want their piece of the pie. So we got this big scramble. And ever since then, it's been like the Wild Wild West is another phrase I use to describe it. So until we can right the ship, and this is actually part of what can, the more people that buy into UX maturity, because it can only be managed if it's done deliberately. The more people that buy into it, we can take control of that and start shifting it back in the right direction. But as long as you have people, saying UX UI, there's no such thing as UX UI. So when people, every time you see that, it takes us down a notch. It hits that discipline-wide UX maturity, and it drives it down just a few notches, because people think that all we do is make things look pretty. They don't realize everything that we do and how broad it really is. Being pretty, how it looks is the last thing. Anybody know about the Jesse James Garrett's 5 planes? If not, look it up. For those of you not familiar with it, go to images.google.com, look up JJG 5 planes, and you'll see a fantastic illustration. He wrote that book in 2002. That book is still fantastic. And he talked about how design is done. And the presentation layer is layer 5. There's 4 things that happened before that. And now people just want to jump into Figma and, Figma, I'm all set, drop the microphone. No. And it's possible to do UI and never do UX. So as long as these people, which are coming in droves, the people with that mentality, anybody can do it. They don't know what that means. Can anybody do UX? Yeah. You willing to put in the hard work? It's like anything else. And it's a science. So it's going to take work. It's going to take time. I've been doing it now this is my 28th year. I'm still learning. You never arrive. So throw that out the window. You opt in to continued education when you do this. So when people change their mindset, we can accomplish some great things, and we can restore the trajectory that we used to have prior to 2011. But until people respect, because before that, everybody respected the discipline. Everybody respected the people who came in before them. Now they want to get out of the way. And I was telling one of the folks back there I was talking to that you got people now, they've been in UX for a week and on Instagram presenting themselves as a mentor. That kind of stuff is common. And that kind of stuff, because we all impact each other. Some of you in here just met me today for the first time. But we always impact each other, whether you've been in UX for a while, whether you're just coming in. We impact each other all the time because of the perception, the broad perception of the discipline is impacted by every person who's in the discipline. You can drive the perception up, you can take the perception down. So we are on a downward trajectory. And until people start facing the facts, we will continue to go down. I fight to keep things on a better. I'm invested, so I'm not far away from retirement, though. I'm older than I look. And So I hate to see where it's going. I hope that I can do something to help make it better. Does that help?
Darren, thank you so much for the talk. It was really helpful. I guess as a follow-up to that conversation, you mentioned that you're teaching at multiple universities. As you think about the state of UX today, what are some key elements that we should consider including in the design curriculum?
The design curriculum is something that's critical because pedagogy is the big. I actually have an instructional design background, and that's what I'll get my PhD in. So I'm a doctoral candidate now. I just can't stop the education thing. It just keeps going. But it has to get back to the basics. We need to understand something I call the 4 pillars of UX, which is usability and heuristics, information architecture. Well, information architecture has almost like vanished. Why? The product is findability. If you don't pay attention to information architecture, how people going to be guaranteed to find things? But it was pushed in the background. And I'll get on my soapbox, and I only have 3 minutes of those soapbox. UX research. And a lot of people think that that's limited to surveys and asking people what they think about a design. There's a book called Universal Design Methods. See, people, that fantastic book, isn't it? They have 2 books. One is design focused, one is research focused. And when you look at the research focused version of the book, 125 methods, methodologies, techniques, and deliverables. Does that sound like UX? The research is a small thing, but it's not. Even people that are coming into, there's this big PhD to UXR movement. And they think that because they have, I'm a PhD candidate, I know what it takes to get there. I know what they've done. I know what they're doing. I know their minds. I know their personas. And they don't realize that academic research and UX research is different. So they come in with this entitlement, frankly, and don't realize, no, just like you may well act like you don't know anything if you're going to come and get started over here. So again, soapbox, 30 seconds. UX research, and then the 4th one is interaction and interface design. Everything we do either revolves around those 4 or is related to them, and then there's overlap between those 4 pillars. So the curriculum has to get people, it has to educate people on those pillars and their other contributing factors, and proper learning experiences. I found out I may have coined that acronym, I didn't know it, but LX. But it turned out that proper learning experiences consist of 3 things: presentation, application, and feedback. Present the information, give people a chance to practice it, and then give them the feedback on how well they did. That's not happening either. The Google program graduated over 300,000 people. Did you know that? Did you know that they won't hire anybody who went through the program? Anyway, how's that for irony? But also, all the feedback is peer-based. Feedback isn't feedback if it doesn't come from an expert. So the learning experience, the proposal, the mere proposal, not to mention the fact that the curriculum, there's no proper pedagogy. People don't even know what pedagogy is. You use that word in Hangman and win a lot. So curriculum is key. And that's one of the problems with educational UX maturity, is that the curriculums that are being designed they're not tapping into experts to help getting those curriculums established. So it doesn't matter that you go through the program. I don't care whether you went to a boot camp, very anti-boot camp, I am, but it doesn't mean that people can't survive after they come out. We do what we call boot camp triage. We do, but the bad thing about the boot camp is the pedagogy. The value proposition and the learning experience lacks. Curriculum is key. And there's one school I know about, and every school has their page. They got their program, they got their page. They're trying to sell you, basically come and enroll with us. And one school, a nameless university, said that unless you are a unicorn, you will not succeed in UX. That's not true at all, but that's how they get people to come into their program. So do you think people are going to thrive when they go through there when that's being said at the foundational level? No. Is that going to be reflected in the curriculum? Yes. That possibly could pan out for somebody if it's reflected in the curriculum, because they'll teach them a lot of things, but will they teach them too much? And how well will it be structured? And instructional design suffered siege before UX did. So that's why if you ever go to training and you walk out like, what in the world did we just do? And they just talk at you for 45 minutes and say you were trained. That's not training. That's not training. So so we're suffering across the board from that perspective. So curriculum must be sound, or there's no true value proposition. It's a sham. It's all about the money. That's it. I think that's it. Okay. All right, that's it. I'm spent. Thanks, everybody.